Linda, welcome, and thank you for joining me in this installment of Curiosity Fridays. And of course, your name isn't just Linda, it's Linda Thompson. Welcome, Linda.
Well, thank you, Eric.
How are you doing today, first of all?
Oh, really well, really well.
Great.
So far, I've avoided COVID-19. I see you have too.
So far, knock on wood, knock
Yes.
on wood. And while I'm ever more careful, I'm also getting really tired of being cooped up, but I'm sure I'm not alone in that.
No.
Linda, I know you as someone who's been around the church a little bit longer than I have. I know you've been
Yes.
are in Chalice Choir when we used to have an active choir and could sing.
Yes.
I know you're in the archives team, the group that meets weekly for the best snacks in the entire church. You may not claim that, but I'll claim that on your behalf. And you've been in the worship team for quite some time.
Yes.
But before that, I would love to hear, and as I said just before we started recording, the arc of your life, and you very appropriately chuckled at me. But tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Well, I came to Columbus as a 17-year-old, starting Ohio State University. I came from a graduating class of 15 to the freshman class of 5,000.
Wow.
My mother said when she let me out on campus to go down the Oval, she thought she might never see me again. So
Was that a good or bad thing? Forgive me, I have to ask.
I think she thought, oh dear,
Yeah.
you know. And so anyway, I graduated from Ohio State several times. And I did not want to go into teaching, but I ended up there because I could make more money in teaching than I could at working at library.
Okay.
So anyway, I came to the church in 1982, joined, and then I got on several committees, membership and adult RE, and then I nominating, and then I ran for the board, and I was elected, and I became board chair. And so when I stepped down, it was often the pattern that the board chair would become the moderator.
Okay.
And I thought, I don't know enough about parliamentary rules. And so Margaret Bausch, I think she had just died. She was our historian. So I went to one of the board members and said I would be happy to be the historian. So they said, fine. So I grabbed Alice Farina and Art Beach, and we worked out a process, and a budget and what all we needed. Judy Clean said, always ask for twice as much as you want.
Oh, you've gone on record. We've got a recording of that. She's not going to like it, but please.
Well, she was just joking, she said, So anyway, so I asked for 400 and I got 200, which was whittled to 100. So, you know how budgets go.
I do.
But I got a lot of my supplies simply from the office. And I would come and I would get boxes out of various closets and try to organize. And after 3 hours, I'd put them back in the boxes and go home. So Don Hippensteel said, you need a place for your stuff. I said, I do, Don. So he ordered a cabinet for me and I could put all the boxes in. So Don was really instrumental in getting us a spot so we could put our stuff in. And I put an ad in the Discoverer and I said, archives needs help, must know ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. So I got a few people, and some people like Laura Adams has passed away and Louise Hastings. So some of the people have gone, but they were there, Ginny Szabo. But now we have a team of 9.
Wow.
And we meet every Tuesday, and we did have room 6 in one of our building campaigns. Deb Balliol really worked hard for us to get the cabinets in room 6. But then, as you know, room 6 has disappeared.
No more room 6.
No more room 6. So we have what we call the archives closet. which is next to the library.
It's not a small closet, though. I
No,
don't know how
no.
if it's. I'm not saying it's large enough for you, but
Well, you can't work in there. You know, you have
no,
to take your
there's
stuff
no
out.
workspace. That's true.
And we were talking with Reverend Marion on Tuesday. We still meet on Zoom on Tuesday mornings at 10.
That's great.
And we keep in touch. And we're trying to figure out how we can meet when we get back open. And we were saying maybe set up tables in Beach Hall if it's available. And we could, you know, we could keep our distance 6 feet.
That
And
sounds workable.
work that way. So we do miss being there and writing articles and looking up stuff and answering questions. So we do miss it.
Yeah.
And I remember Mark Bellatini, we were back in room 6 laughing one time, and Mark came back and he said, "Is archives really this much fun?" And everybody said, "Yes, yeah."
Good.
So
I also understand, and I may want to go back to archives and your role as church historian. But first, I want to delve a little further back. I understand you have a history with something called the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator.
yeah.
Can you describe what that is and your work in that?
Well,
For or with that?
Yeah, it's a personality indicator. It is not a test. Please, you know, don't call it a test. And I ran into it. I was teaching at Whetstone High School, and I was teaching concept of hero, in which I ran into Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell and all that. And so the university engaged me in working with the freshman early experiencing program, in which freshmen would go out to a school 4 days a week and serve as a teacher's aide. Well, they took several personality inventories. One of them was the Myers-Briggs, and I took it and I thought, this has possibilities maybe for use in teaching. And so I went down to the University of Florida at Gainesville and met with some of the people who did the research in it. And then I found out there was a chapter in Columbus, and so I joined that. I ended up really learning a great deal about it. And when I got ready to write a dissertation, I worked with this one professor, and he asked me to give the Myers-Briggs to 75 teachers. So I did. And I drew my dissertation subjects from those 75 people. However, I didn't know what type they were. My friend, she said, "I don't want to be called an informant. That sounds terrible." So I said, "Well, you're my advisor." So I would ask a couple of people, and then she'd say, "Okay, well, here's a couple more people to ask." She made sure. My committee said I had to interview 24 people. I did a qualitative study. People who did quantitative studies said the Myers-Briggs, there was no difference in teaching at all. Well, I did a qualitative study, and there was quite a bit of difference in how they planned and all that. So I graduated finally, and then I used it as best I could, because there's one of the things I found interesting was the introversion extroversion.
Mm-hmm.
And people think that means, you know, shy. It doesn't mean shy. Extroverts are more likely to process things by talking them out with people. Okay. Introverts, we like to think about it for a long time. And then we tell you, I went to one of my committee members and I opened my briefcase and come out with 150 typed pages. And I said, "Well, here's the beginning." And he said, "You're an introvert." Yeah. He said, "My extroverts come in with a napkin and you know," and so anyway.
So extroversion and introversion, if I remember correctly, there are some other factors that the indicator spends some time, gives attention to. Can you lift up those? Okay,
yes. Well, you know, these are sort of ordinary words that take on more than an ordinary meaning. And the perceiving function, there's two of them, sensing on the one side and intuition on the other. You know, I'm going to oversimplify here, but
It's all right.
sensing is more interested in the details and the facts. Intuition is more interested in the overview and the bigger picture. And so there's that. And then there's the evaluation or judging function, not to mean that you're judgmental, but how you evaluate things. And one is thinking, which is more logical, and feeling, which is more value-based.
Okay.
Okay, now that's as far as Carl Jung went. But the Myers-Briggs people, they decided, well, how do you know which is which? So after reading him very carefully, they added the last two, J, judging, and P, perceiving. And those literally tell you what your dominant is. So if it says, you know, if you're an extrovert and you're a J, that means thinking or feeling is your dominant.
Okay.
And if you're an introvert, that means sensing or perceiving is your dominant. It's just the opposite. Okay. So I started out with just using introversion and extroversion, because somebody said, oh, you mean I have to make all my lesson plans for all of those types? I said, no, you don't.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I said, sometimes I would just give the students a choice. You can write your paper on this, or you can do this.
Okay. Okay. And how did you use the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, and what did you learn from that?
Well, I learned that some types said they knew the best way to do something, and that's what they were going to teach the students, the best way. Okay. Another group, particularly the MFs, said, we want to draw the students out. We want them to find their own best way. And so they're, you know, so I ended up asking teachers why they went into teaching. And the NFs said to make a difference with their life. And the STs said, I wanted to teach them the best way to do something. And, you know, so.
Now, I am, if I'm remembering correctly, and it's been a while since I've taken the MBTI and my MBTI, I'm an NF, and I have to say that what you're saying both reflects in my primary approach to things, but also it's a very Unitarian and Unitarian Universalist approach to things. I had not thought in terms of the denomination having a...
Well, I read a lot of research based on mainline churches, including the UUs, and the UUs are more likely, they have more introverts and more intuitives than the mainstream.
I think it was one of our early Unitarian ministers, Channing, who said the role of religious exploration is not to instill, but to lift up what's already in place. And that sounds almost completely parallel to what I just heard you say.
Well, I happen to be an NF. So.
Terrific.
Yes, so,
and then how did you use the inventory?
Well, I used it in preparing for my own teaching, but then because I did a residency down at Ohio State, so a lot of the professors and so forth knew about my use of the Myers-Briggs, so they would invite me in to do the Myers-Briggs for classes and to explain the whole thing, and then after I graduated. I knew a lot of the people in the Columbus Public Schools where I had taught, and they would hire me to do workshops for the teachers and the teachers' aides. And then the aides, they loved the difference between the introverts and the extroverts, because they said, well, a lot of the teachers send the extroverts down here because they're acting out. And they said, they're just being extroverts. Yeah. And I said, that's exactly right. So.
Oh, terrific.
So, and then people would, they would think that students weren't very bright if they didn't volunteer answers. And I said, unless you ask them, they're not going to tell you. So, so
How did they respond to that?
they said, well, I never thought about that,
Yeah.
so. Mhm, mhm.
And if I have it right, Linda, you used the MBTI. I can't even get that right.
MBTI. Mhm.
MBTI. I should know better. Outside the classroom as well with other groups.
Yes. One of the most interesting ones, they were having it was in the College of Agriculture, and they were bringing in, the extension people. They were bringing in farmers and their wives. So they wanted to do this. So I sent it out early so I could get them back in time and then give them all out. And a lot of the farmers, and I've read research on this, I don't know about it now, is they were sensing, and maybe introverts, and they kept doing the same thing, hoping to get a better result.
Yeah.
Well, but this one wife and husband, obviously he was an introvert and she was an extrovert. And she said, well, I talk to him and I just talk and he doesn't listen to anything I say. And everybody else was just cracking up. And he was sitting there just smiling. He says, no, I don't listen to her.
So, was there any resolution?
Well, they finally, he said, if you tell me something once, that's enough, you don't have to tell it to me over and over. And at least give me a chance to talk. So I think that sort of worked out.
Oh.
The police, that was interesting. It was sheriffs and police. It was the some sheriff's association, and they asked me. So again, I sent the stuff, and they were more sensing than intuitive, though there were intuitive people there. And this one young man, he was the only one in the whole group. And I gave him a type chart, no names, just the type chart. And he was an introverted, intuitive, feeling, perceiving type. He came up and he said, what am I doing here? I said, well, I'm not sure. They need you, but they may not know they need you. Well, that was the message. You need all types,
Yes.
I gave a workshop once, and this principal came up and he says, well, now I understand which is the best teacher, and I will only hire those types. And I thought, you've missed the whole thing. You've missed it all. So
The
you need
students are going to be everywhere on the scale.
Yes. And actually we are too at the church. And, the introverts need the extroverts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, but I found it. Let's see. I think it was Mary McCauley and Gordon Lawrence. They wrote a book called Gifts Differing. And no, that was Isabel Briggs Myers. Okay. And it was, we all have gifts. They are different, but they are all needed. So.
That sounds like a bit of wisdom for a Thursday afternoon, Linda. Thank you.
Okay.
What was there any group that you did the MBTI with that was, I don't know, this is unfair perhaps, but your favorite or that surprised you the most?
Well, I enjoyed all of them, but the teachers' aides, they were absolutely overjoyed at getting information about introverts and extroverts, and and they were supposed to help them learn lessons, and they picked up the sensing and intuition, and they were ready. Everybody should take this, they said. Now everybody, I said, it's not going to happen, but it helped them. So anyway, and I did enjoy the farmers.
Oh, that's terrific. How do you think they used it besides the husband and wife that you mentioned earlier?
Well, I remember one of the policemen walked me out to the car, and he said, this really is helpful to me. He said, I can be so patient talking a drunk out of the car, and then I go home and I'm so frustrated, I take it out on the family. And he said, now this is helping me to understand the dynamics of my family, and I need to back away and find a way to let the frustration out.
Wow.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
That's
And
huge.
yes, and when I did my dissertation, I had 24 subjects. I wrote a summary of every one of them and gave them that. And they said, you're the first dissertation person that's ever given us anything back.
Wow.
And one man had left the ministry because he didn't deal with people well, so he went into teaching.
All right,
So,
it's going to take me a while to wrap my head around that.
okay. So anyway, I just, those 24 people still live in my head,
Sure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, Linda, this has taken, you've given me much more time than I asked for. I want to be fair to you. Thank you.
Well, you're
Thank
most
you.
welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
And I look forward to seeing you in this form, but in person whenever that is possible and sensible. And I'm frowning because I'm realizing that one of the last things that come back to the church are going to be the choirs. And that's what
Oh, yes. Oh,
I'm
mm-hmm,
not alone in missing that ferociously.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
I'm not a singer. I'm just the recipient. We miss you.
Yes, this would have been the choir concert this weekend.
It
Too.
would have been. There
Mhm.
will be music, is my
Yeah.
understanding. There will be
Yes,
great
that,
music,
mhm. Yes,
but it won't be exactly the same.
it won't be. Well,
Great.
thank you, Eric.
You are welcome, Linda. You take care. Thanks again.
Mhm.